I give the call to the Honourable Diane Evers.
Thank you, Acting President. 4 years ago, at the 2017 election, I was given the opportunity to make some positive change. I took the role seriously, learned quickly, and did my best to do some good. I listened to people, travelled throughout the Southwest, and found out the issues where people were not being heard or where they were being ignored. I also found issues that were so big that people felt powerless to even speak up. I soon realized that my role was not just to speak in Parliament on behalf of the people who were not being listened to, but also those that had not found their voice, or those who did not have a voice, also to speak for animals, plants, and the planet. Our system of governance does not provide a voice for the environment. Our governance structure was originally designed to represent the voices of wealthy white males, reluctantly advancing to include those without wealth, women, and eventually First Nations peoples. But the design of our system is not finished yet because there is no voice for our young people or for their future. There is no voice for the health of the landscape, for biodiversity, or for the planet. Many times I've sat through Parliament hearing old, tired phrases about jobs and growth. But the words belie the motivation. The jobs and growth story often seems to gloss over the workers, the employees, and speaks more to the shareholders, the owners, and the industry. The unearned income for the owners of capital. Our system perpetuates the ability of those with wealth and power to increase their wealth and power at the expense of others, driving us to a more inequitable society. Yet, this is the system we have, the system I was elected to, and the system I learned to work with. And now it has delivered a government with very strong majority, so strong that the Premier, Mark McGowan, and his team can do just about anything. They have the choice either to maintain the status quo, keeping the gas industry, property developers, and other big donors on side, or this government can be courageous, progressive, and forward-thinking, and address the ills of our society, act to reverse the causes of climate change, and lead us to a bright new future. Western Australia is a wealthy state, and our vast mineral reserves and other assets, plus the knowledge and experience within our population, we have the capacity to provide homes for the homeless, the capacity to care for people with addictions or who have mental health issues, and the ability for true recognition of First Nations peoples, alongside the ability to provide supporting social infrastructure as determined by First Nations peoples. As a state with Labor in government, we have the capacity to make Western Australia a more equitable society, and we have the capacity to stop the degradation of our landscape. This government has the capacity to introduce carbon offsets that can direct funding toward rehabilitating degraded landscapes. They have the capacity to reach a 100% stationary energy target by 2030, and with the cooperation of the federal government, rapidly increase the uptake of electric vehicles and move freight transport to electric or hydrogen-powered trains on rail. This government could preserve our remaining native forests, invest in the plantation industry, and encourage a rapid uptake of regenerative farming. This may sound like utopia, but it is well within the reach of this government. They have the capacity. Do they have the will? They have 4 years with only their major donors or the general population to appease. Their major donors can fund the next election, but the population will vote. Imagine 4 years from now. What would the Premier, Mark McGowan, and his team want on their resume? Would it list the number of roads widened and the number of skyscrapers approved? Or would it show the decrease in homeless people, the decrease in numbers of people needing mental health support, and the reduction in prison populations alongside a decrease in crime? Would the resume list the reduction of major weather events and wildfires? Or will this government expect people will be accustomed to an ever-increasing climate crisis? I have been privileged to be able to speak in the Western Australian Parliament over these past 4 years on many issues. Sometimes I saw that my words had been effective in getting positive change. Unfortunately, I leave now with many of the issues I feel strongly about still in limbo. And given the motion on soil carbon just debated moments ago, maybe I have had an impact. And I thank the Honourable Sally Talbot for that little boost to my ego. Through my term, regenerative agriculture has been mentioned quite often in this chamber. Not only is the Minister a keen advocate, there have also been neutral or even positive acknowledgement from some members of the crossbench. Considering the rapidly increasing uptake and development globally, it has been positive to see fellow members of the chamber opening their minds to change however reluctantly. Within the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development, I understand change is brewing, and I sincerely wish I could be here to see it mature into full-on support. I appreciate that the Minister's promotion of regenerative agriculture will require broad support to fend off the detractors who benefit from the current industrial agricultural systems of land degradation and decreasing nutritional value. Current estimates of viable agricultural land is showing that globally we have just 40 to 60 years remaining worldwide should current practices continue. If that is not a wake-up call to people who like to eat, I don't know what is. Regenerative agriculture is not rocket science. You need living microorganisms in the soil to efficiently deliver nutrients to the plant roots. You need to keep the soil covered to hold the moisture in to keep the microorganisms alive. You need to stop killing the microorganisms. That's about it. If you do this, you will vastly increase the carbon in the soil. You will massively increase the water retention capability of the soil, enormously diminishing the impacts from drought. And you will grow food with more nutrition and less chemical contamination. Alongside these benefits, the diversified farming operations that go hand in hand with regenerative agriculture will increase economic and social opportunities in regional areas. Integrating animals, crops, trees, even hemp on one farm run by a number of families can provide a diversified experience and a wealth of shared knowledge. Investment in a hemp industry will open new industry opportunities for building materials, clothing, and other textiles, as well as food and body care products. You can even use hemp for railroad sleepers. We could go so far as to integrate timber plantations on farm, to be milled on site to be used to construct the homes of the families as they grow. This brings me to forestry. Early in my term, I engaged a world-renowned consultant to detail a deliberative process for the government to use to determine the desires and expectations of a broad cross-section of people with regard to our native forests. I received no feedback. Now I desperately wish that this process is picked up and considered as the Conservation and Parks Commission prepares the next forest management plan that is due out in 2024. Following the lack of action to protect our forest, I introduced a bill into this House last year to amend the Forest Products Act of 2006. This bill sets out the steps necessary to make changes to conserve our remaining forests, protect our remaining biodiversity, develop the softwood and hardwood plantation industry, and dissolve the Forest Products Commission. Please, no one likes them. The Forest Products Commission is not required. Understand that the state is losing financially on the timber industry, even before we consider the $135 million write-off in 2018 for an accounting error over the previous 10 years. Understand that there are less than 500 full-time equivalent people employed in the native timber industry. Compare that with the 3,800 registered beekeepers in the state, with an additional 50 new registrations every month. Doesn't this indicate it is time for a change? As bee populations decline worldwide, the opportunities for bee export become nearly limitless. The associated benefits of forest protection are extensive. An active, thriving forest draws down more carbon. A healthy, resilient forest contributes to rainfall through evapotranspiration. Reducing threats to the forests will support our globally significant biodiverse ecological systems. The timber industry will not end. It will simply be based on plantations. If you haven't planted it, then don't cut it down. Simple. Please don't knock this back with comments that it takes too long to grow a tree. Start now. Tree cropping integrated on regenerative farms works. Considerable work has been done over the years to determine where the mills and the trees should be located. Use this information. It is now time to invest urgently. And while on the subject of forests, please stop burning them. Dropping incendiaries to ignite them may help with your outrageous key performance indicator of dollars per hectare burnt, but it does nothing to protect endangered species, avoid critical ecological habitats, nor allow for the cool burns associated with indigenous science and practice. These massive-scale hot burns don't even protect us. As if regrowth does as if regrowth does occur, it can be more dense than ever. Likely has more weeds. It may eventually deplete the seed bank for obligate reseeders, that is, the plants that can only regenerate from seed after fire. And it will require continued harsh management. If you are after safety, please acknowledge and consider all the research and recognize that there are different methods or mechanisms dependent on species mix, geology, past human intervention, rainfall patterns, and so forth. It is not a one-size-fits-all, and it is not a process that should be undertaken with emotion. Fire is a tool, one of many. Let's put aside fear and emotive language, look at the facts, and work to find sustainable outcomes. A desert won't burn, but then do we want to turn our magnificent southern forests into a desert? For some time, it has been known that the state's acts pertaining to water are well overdue for review. The Southern Forest Irrigation Scheme regulation changes to charge minors and public drinking water suppliers for the actual cost of licensing, as well as the contemplation of the same for agricultural water users, has raised many important questions. Changes occurring with regard to spring rights is also causing concern. On top of this, we must figure in climate change and the expected continued decrease in rainfall, particularly so if we do not act quickly to restore our forests and soils, as mentioned previously. The Department of Water and Environmental Regulations website indicates there will be a new act to replace the existing 6 acts. As this new act will cover water provision, drainage, sewerage, irrigation, allocation, and waterway conservation, the drafters of this legislation certainly have their work cut out for them. I have concerns that the magnitude of this new act might overwhelm the potential for scrutiny available from this lopsided incoming House of Review. There is so much that could be put into this act and so much opportunity to address many of the impacts of climate change. This new act cannot simply look at the past. It must address the future as modeled by experts understanding the coming changes. Rainfall decline, more frequent violent storms, increasing pressure on limited water resources through pollution, development, population, industry, intensive agriculture. All of these things will need to be addressed. This is an area for collaboration like no other. Your stakeholders not only include industry, farming, residential developments, but also local governments, the landscape, and all our waterways, including the ocean and its biodiversity. Consider being visionary for this act and look to how we can improve our situation. Now is the time to invest wisely in assets that will reduce our ongoing costs or even bring in future revenues. We must look to recharge our aquifers with clean, potable water. We must maintain the health of our wetlands and waterways. We must ensure that rubbish and high nutrient loads are not headed downstream and out to sea. We need a government department that has responsibility for the quality of the water going through our ancient drainage systems. Even if good water management does not win votes, like new roads seem to, this is a time for bold action and visionary leadership. You have the majority. Show us what you can do. On the subject of environment, there are a few items on my wish list, all of which I've mentioned in here before. First of all, how about a State of the Environment report? Wouldn't this be good to have on your resume in 4 years' time? Something to show that you have taken action and made a difference. If you start now, you could complete it by mid-2022 and have 2 complete years of results by the time electioneering begins again. You could use it when the Liberals take the reins in the future to hold them to account. If you need assistance writing key performance indicators for the environment, let me know. I know a few people who could help. So through my term, I introduced a few private members' bills on the environment, and I'd like to take this time to remind you. Now, I understand that a bill to recognize the rights of nature and future generations was considerably more progressive than would ever get a look in, though I also understand that this is how some acts begin. The voluntary assisted dying bill passed through this House in 2019 began nearly 30 years ago as a private member's bill. I'm not quite that optimistic, though I hope suggesting the idea may have woken up a few people to the idea that we are not just making decisions for people living today. Our decisions affect many people and the entire biodiversity for some time. One of the acts to be superseded by the new Water Act, mentioned earlier, was originally passed in 1914, and I'd guess that there are others in force even older. I continued with a more likely bill to establish an environmental court, as has occurred in New South Wales, or an environmental tribunal, similar to our existing state administrative tribunal, an entity that can make binding determinations rather than simply provide advice. Our Environmental Protection Authority, if it is to perform its role adequately, requires considerably more funding and considerably more power. I wouldn't go so far as to say it provides a rubber stamp, but having seen some of the proposals and developments go through in this term, I am sad to say that we sorely need considerably greater environmental protections. We have got to get away from sizing up new industry or new developments solely based on their financial aspects, and really consider what sort of environment we want to leave to our descendants. To make environmental protection very simple, I introduced one further bill that I hope to see influence the coming budget. Many in this place have acknowledged the difficulties and lack of accountability with which royalties for regions are distributed. On many occasions, I have tried to demonstrate to regional constituents that royalties for regions is not being used as intended. It is not fully allocated, and some of the allocations are for services that were previously provided through other sources. $250 million per year goes to WaterCorp to provide equal water pricing across the state. As WaterCorp then makes a surplus, the funds are returned to the state as a dividend. $80 million per year comes from royalties for regions for school bus service previously provided through the Department of Education. So the private members bill I introduced would provide positive benefits into regional communities by allocating $100 million per year to the environment through the numerous land care and environmental groups operating with an extensive workforce of willing volunteers working alongside government departments to restore, protect, and rehabilitate our landscape. The environment doesn't need humans. The environment doesn't need humans. We need the environment. This state and our government must wake up and seriously protect, preserve, and restore the home our environment provides. Put an end to clearing unless commensurate replanting or restoration work has provided results. Put an end to native forest logging. And seriously monitor water contamination or misuse, clearing without a permit, contamination and pollution, and impose effective charges when regulations are ignored or broken. If you haven't already noticed, regional development is something I care deeply about. Development of the region will not be a piecemeal, ad hoc, or laissez-faire exercise. We need some long-term planning, and part of that planning should be focused on supporting and encouraging decentralization of the population. COVID has driven many people to flee the city and head for greener pastures. This is a positive for the state. This should be seen as something to encourage. The regions provide the funding for the state through mining and the food for people through agriculture, which also provides export dollars. The regions are where we can fight climate change by drawing down carbon into our trees and our soil. COVID has shown us that people see the regions as a place to be physically and mentally healthy. Encourage this. I recognize that there are some economies of scale in having people in close proximity, but this only goes so far. Perth already has dispersed across a broad landscape, increasing financial costs and environmental costs. Economies of scale can also be achieved in regional areas by increasing the density in regional communities and getting benefit from the underutilized existing infrastructure. These regional areas can be hubs of activity if we plan ahead and make the best use of the local resources. Rather than get big, let's get smart. Localize food processing and manufacturing, create abattoirs where the animals are raised, make furniture and housing frames where the trees are planted, process food where the crops are grown. We can do better. Getting freight on rail provides a long-term solution. Don't tell me you need a return on investment over 20 years. We have seen rail lines that can be built to last 100 years. Do it once, do it right. I've heard recently how much is being spent on roads in the regional areas. This government cannot deny that the majority of this spending is justified by the number of truck movements. Plan for a sustainable future. Plan for freight on rail. As we plan ahead and create infrastructure to reduce heavy freight transport on our roads. Our regional areas will be safer for the rapidly increasing regional travel. Again, COVID has changed our behavior with regard to travel. And I see this as providing many positive benefits to the regions and for our population. The more people that get out to the regional areas, the more people will choose to live there. And the increased economic activity will make it more appealing to more people. People who are moving into the Southwest are moving for a better lifestyle, not necessarily a lifestyle where they spend more, rather a lifestyle of good health, friendly community, activity that takes them closer to nature, and so forth. As people arrive in our regional communities to live, we are desperately finding that we need more homes. And this provides a tricky problem for the government, as many of our small regional communities want to stay small. Here is where good planning steps in and works with the people, the local governments and the developers, to ensure that sustainable communities with a range of price points, including some social housing, is integrated into the existing fabric of society using a collaborative approach to find solutions that work for everyone. Dream big. Here is the place to be aspirational. Open your horizons and see what possibilities exist. But before people move regionally, they often visit as tourists, and our regional areas have so much to offer. First Nations tourism must be nurtured and supported, as it is our roots, our connection to the landscape, to time, and to the natural environment. The more we can listen to Indigenous science and Indigenous history, the more we will understand our place in this world and understand the responsibilities of long-term management of this landscape. We have much to learn. Sharing this knowledge widely through tourist-type adventures will assist in keeping the knowledge alive. Combining Indigenous knowledge with ecotourism just makes good sense and assists visitors in getting the most out of their stay. We can also build on opportunities for accessible tourism to be inclusive of people and their differences or limitations. I understand that some cave tours are now planned to limit noise and excess light to provide a more calm experience for people with heightened sound or light sensitivities. We can also develop activities specifically for people with mobility issues. Providing alternatives can make us a more inclusive society. One idea I've come across recently, and makes sense if planning for a bright new future, is a suggestion of a vehicle racetrack specifically for electric vehicles. Think about it. Unlike the Albany Motorplex, which will be outdated in the not-too-distant future, with its noise issues and concerns of pollution runoff, electric vehicles would have little noise and minimal runoff concerns. The suggestion is to locate it at Greenbushes, near the lithium mine, and open it up to everything from trucks to scooters, even gophers. Out of interest, I asked a few gopher drivers during the election campaign and received unexpected enthusiasm. I hadn't realized so many gopher drivers had an interest in racing. Universities and other research organizations could be involved to study battery and motor technology, and being next to the lithium mine, that would just add to the knowledge of what we can use there and how to develop it and grow the industry in that area. Noting the greater performance capabilities of electric vehicles, the researchers would have a rather enjoyable time. I have noticed over the past 4 years this government's and their energy entities' evolving view to renewables. From the initial complaints about how rooftop solar will damage the system, you've advanced to tolerate rooftop solar and are even beginning to appreciate the benefits of integrating it into our system. Over this coming term, I hope to see an embrace of distributed, community-driven renewable systems, as this is where our future lies. One brief comment on uranium. We know it to be problematic on many counts, and with all its associated negative impacts, it is unfathomable why anybody would give any consideration to nuclear energy. The previous Liberal government slid through approvals for 4 uranium mines in its last few weeks in government. Now this government will see those environmental approvals time out. Please let them. The projects pose serious environmental risks and economic liability extending over decades, if not centuries.
question before the Chair is the motion be agreed to, and it's a continuation of the remarks of the Honourable Diane.
Thank you, Acting President. So, back to business, and particularly small business. This is where our opportunity lies. Small business should figure prominently in our future. It is where innovation can occur. It is the largest employment sector. It can take on the development of the tourism operations, the value adding to agricultural produce, hospitality, manufacturing. There are unlimited possibilities and opportunities for the development of small business, particularly in the regions. This government needs to assist. It's not all about red tape and green tape. It's about equity and fairness. The issues are about competing with the larger players who have the means and motivation to reduce competition, ensure the big players meet their requirements and abide by the law, even when they do have better legal teams and financial wizards. I recognize some work is being done on this front. For example, getting subcontractors to be paid fairly and on time. But this is also slow. I hope to see further action over the coming term to level the playing field for small business. In addition, if this government would like to be progressive, encourage cooperatives and other business structures that make it possible for more people to get involved in business ownership. Share farming is becoming more of a global issue for agriculture because, of course, we all know it's very expensive to get into agriculture. But through the opportunities of share farming, something that we can look around the world, see how it's being done, seeing how it's being done well, maybe we can do that here and get some of the new young people who are in the city currently who'd like to be out on a farm to actually find a way where they can do it without having the $1 million or the family connections behind them. I think it is something for our future. I think the luck can be there, and I wouldn't mind being involved in the conversation. Innovation in this area can help to diversify our economy, making it stronger and more equitable. Growing small business is where local economies benefit. Local jobs, less travel, good for local government, good for communities. There are many benefits to increased small business activity, and I look forward to seeing this government take action in supporting small enterprise development. Of all the portfolios I held within the Greens, I feel I did not speak often enough on sport and recreation. It just didn't come up much. There were environment-related issues, such as skiing at Lake Mullaculp, a place of significant Aboriginal significance, and there was also the consideration of mountain bike trails in the Parongarup National Park. Both of these items should not happen. It's not appropriate, it's destructive, it's not what we need to do. But other than environment issues, most of my concerns or interest was related to ensuring that opportunities for sport and recreation are diverse, accessible, inclusive, financially possible, and so forth, to encourage broad participation, knowing that the benefits of fitness, health, and social connection make our population and our communities stronger. Now, given my accounting background, I had the most fun at budget time. I think only the Honourable Steve Thomas would also agree about that. I walked in thinking how depressing it was, having watched as the previous Liberal government spent their windfall from the previous boom up through 2014, leaving the state with a mounting debt. Now I've seen this government do not much better. The debt trajectory continued, even though extensive cuts were made to staff and services. Some explanation can be placed on COVID and the decision to try to keep the economy humming. I get that. I understand your intentions to keep workers employed and money flowing to the shareholders. So, as COVID struck, money flowed to shovel-ready projects. Unfortunately, this provided an opportunity for your property developer friends and donors to fast-track development approvals right past the desires of the communities, and also with little regard for the environment or long-term planning needs of the state. As an accountant, and considering the big picture, what struck me hard was the speed at which shovel-ready projects were put forward by the Department of Main Roads. I have not held back in voicing my wariness toward main roads. Governments understand that building roads gets votes. People can see the work progressing, and for the most part, they get a smoother, more efficient trip to their destination. but at what cost? For example, the Albany Ring Road, budgeted at $175 million, is progressing swiftly. Yet, for who? When I asked the expected truck movements on the new road, it appears there will be just 1,200 trucks per day, only 300 more than currently travel on the existing road, and these figures were provided for the year 2031. The existing road of 2 kilometers rarely has more than 1 or 2 trucks on it at any time, and the new route will be 17 kilometers rather than the current distance of 7 kilometers. So understand, we're spending $175 million on a road that is unnecessary. If there had been any sort of comprehensive planning, any forward thinking, not just the 4-year cycle of an election cycle, and not just from the Department for Building Roads, we may have found a different solution. Understand that nearly all the freight transport on this route is either grain or wood chips going to the port. If the government had simply consulted with CBH, who were already exploring a grain terminal at Down Road Industrial Park, we could have spent 20 to 30 million and shifted that freight task to rail. This would have addressed the traffic concerns at the roundabout and on the connecting roads. I just can't understand it, other than how I understand that building roads gets votes. Nothing a worker likes more than having a clear run on their daily commute. Unfortunately, more roads leads to more cars, more trucks, more traffic. I do see, however, that investment is going to public transport in the urban areas. It seems like we've put so much into roads, and now there's a bit spilling over. Maybe Main Roads has just run out of roads to build. I'm not certain, but there's money going into public transport, and I am delighted. Well done. I even feel that I have been heard. Every year for the past 3, I have asked the question of the Public Transport Authority, will free public transport be considered? And I'm delighted at the plans to cap public transport at 2 zones. But can I just ask that when the trains become crowded, please don't put the price up. More trains, more passengers indicates you need more trains. Simple. More trains means less people on the roads. Less people on the roads means less need to expand and extend the road network. Give Main Roads something else to do. We need to plan for 50 years, not 5. We've got to make public transport smooth, simple, inexpensive, and people will use it, even more so if the traffic is bad. Now, another issue that's well within your grasp to address is homelessness. Look globally for solutions. There's solutions out there. Many cities are addressing the situation by providing homes for the homeless. Amazing. It's that simple. The reduction in costs associated with homelessness, including health costs, local government costs, policing costs, and so forth, make it cost neutral or even positive. Think broadly. We can be a better, more caring society without hurting the bank balance. And if we get that plantation industry going, or even more quickly, a hemp brick industry, we can build the homes using local sustainable materials. There are so many more issues that have a doable, affordable, progressive, sustainable, sensitive, systemic solutions. You have the support of the voters, you have the financial resources, you have the capacity. Do you have the will? The courage to take action? I can see the shoots of progressive thinking. Green hydrogen, thank you, Minister. I think we're going there right down the right direction. There's so much future ahead of us in that way. Just expand the technology for renewables greatly, turn it into hydrogen, transport it, send it where you need to. I even heard about somehow making fertilizer out of it, and I just don't have the chemistry background to work that one out yet, but I'll get there. Investment in rail. Well done. Really pleased to see the advance coming there. Increased national parks. It makes sense now. Just give us more and the resources to look after them. That's all I ask. But for all these baby steps, it is still not enough. The increasing impacts of climate change are upon us at a rate faster than our system of governance can even contemplate. Corporate interests have more time and resources to keep laws and regulations in their favor and more time and resources than any government has to create or enforce those laws. The job ahead of you, should you choose to be bold, is enormous. It will require a vision and a strength to stand up to those old, tired habits of the privileged, wealthy conservatives who clutch to the misguided belief that their death will arrive before they are personally impacted by the damage humanity continues to inflict on the planet. Harsh, but true. I understand saying the word economy gets attention from these people, and it even gets votes if people think your words indicate they will have more money in their pocket. But what value is a robust economy if rates of poor mental health skyrocket alongside drug dependency and suicides? Where is the equity if a thriving economy channels wealth into the hands of a few, while more become homeless, malnourished, or physically ill? The strength and resilience of our social structures must be a priority before we rely on the economy to sort things out. And where will our society be if we have not reversed the worldwide degradation of our planet? Right here in WA, we have so much to protect that this government and preceding governments take for granted. How can we continue to believe developers and miners who consistently go bankrupt when projects go pear-shaped? How can we continue clearing and felling old, healthy, thriving forests when we know that their value for biodiversity, for human health, and for moderating climate? How can we? How can you, Premier? It is your government who have the opportunity to make a positive difference, to become world leaders, to raise your profile and increase your adoring crowds on an even larger scale. Be bold. Take action. The steps have been laid out before you on many occasions. Don't worry about where to start, just start. Alongside green hydrogen and other renewables, make legislation to draw down carbon. In our soils alone, you have the capacity to capture enough carbon that you could go on burning coal. The point is to be carbon neutral by 2050, not just aspirationally, but in fact. In my world, I'd like to see us carbon negative well before 2050. Even as we become carbon negative, the excesses of our past and present will follow us for some time as the carbon already absorbed in our oceans is released. Carbon continues being sequestered in a mature forest, bringing it down from the heavens into its leaves, branches, trunk, and down into its roots and into the earth. Carbon is captured into the trees of a plantation to be cut and sequestered in those affordable and social homes we so desperately need. Introduce carbon offsets on those that emit carbon in massive quantities. These companies must show results where they have sequestered carbon and not simply hollow promises that they have plans to do so. Otherwise, they pay someone to sequester it for them. This can be achieved in land restoration, soil carbon increases, forest restoration. Have a look online, drawdown.org. Drawdown.org if you need some ideas about how to draw down carbon and how to fix this planet. The important message is carbon negative. We must find a sustainable existence where we are drawing down carbon that is net negative carbon, not just to make up for the excesses of the past. My work in this chamber now comes to a close. I hope I have made an impact. It is a strange existence, watching the games that grown men and women play, not to make a positive difference, but to score points. From time to time, this place seems so much like a classroom of around year 6. And that is not to put down year 6 students. My expectations for the character of members of Parliament were higher. We seem to act as if by putting on a suit or the equivalent, that we are giving the position the respect it deserves. By my standard, that respect is demonstrated by our actions, our integrity, our character. I recognize that this system is based on the Westminster system and that it has been around for hundreds of years, but that doesn't make it best or right. I think humanity is capable of something more. I see a world where people work collaboratively, recognizing that planet Earth is our home, and if we screw it up, we will lead to our own demise. Indigenous cultures around the world recognize the value of protecting their home, and here we are, day by day, destroying ours. I give my thanks to my husband, Tony, for all he has done to support me through the past 4 years. Thank you. And thank you to our son, Carl, and daughters, Rose, Jessica, and Tia, for being there and giving my life value. I must thank my Greens colleagues here in the chamber. I'll thank all of them. Having a Greens team made scrutiny and oversight so much more possible. Thank you, and I really appreciate that having the 4 of us now looks near on easy compared to the daunting task ahead. So thank you to all Greens and Greens voters. It is unfortunate that all the work we have done leading up to this day has resulted in just one Greens MP being elected. I have great expectations for the incoming Greens MLC, Brad Pettit. I wish him all the best of good luck and support from the progressive thinkers in WA to carry him through the next term. I really feel that the scrutiny of this government is going to happen out on the streets, in the community, amongst the people who care. And that's what I hope to be encouraging with my own work and encouraging those people to work through Brad to make sure that their voice is heard here. Because we've got to work together if we expect to have a positive future for our children and our grandchildren. I'd also like to thank my staff for all the work they have done supporting people who needed assistance to have their voices heard. Many supporters have said to me that the amount of work put out through my office was staggering, and I could not have done it without the excellent staff that I have supporting me. My heartfelt thanks and appreciation goes to all the brilliant people I've met through the past 4 years. I learned so much. I grew as a person, and I made some good connections that may last a lifetime. My genuine thanks and appreciation go to all people who work toward a progressive, inclusive, sustainable, and equitable society for Western Australia, and to all those people who I feel so close to. The people who recognize this planet is our only one, and when we damage it, we damage ourselves. When we lose a species, we've lost it forever. When we reach that tipping point for climate change, this planet will no longer be habitable by the billions of people who now live here. You think COVID has been challenging, you ain't seen nothing yet. Those climate-related natural disasters, the floods, the fires, the droughts, the cyclones, get used to it. And when they affect you, or you find you can't get insurance on your own home, then step back and think, can I do more? The answer is yes, you can. We're the privileged ones that have the time in here to actually make the laws and regulations that will affect our future. In this room, in the coming term, a positive difference can be made. Work like professionals, and we can all prosper. Continue to work like children, give us more of the same, and watch as our beautiful, habitable climate deteriorates. The new crossbench may see Brad Pettit as the only voice on the progressive side of politics. This could result in many of the issues I've raised over the term being all but forgotten. The environmental impacts of prescribed burns, indiscriminate clearing of native bush, the need and benefits of regenerative agriculture, continued destruction of native forests, lack of real recognition for environmental damage, loss of biodiversity, and so on. And these are really just the environmental ones. I'll leave it to my colleagues to discuss some of the other issues. I focus mostly on my portfolios because I see so much possibility for our future. And here is where a lot of that can start. So knowing this, I am committed to raising the voices of people who care about our future, who care about our landscape, who care about all people, and not just those like themselves. There are a great number of people who put their trust in this government to manage our society, to keep us healthy. But there is more that we need. We need no new gas. Of course, I mean LNG and not hydrogen. Hydrogen, go for it. No new gas. An end to native forest logging. An environmental protection authority with authority. A planning department that understands systems thinking and innovative, sustainable, long-term planning. A public transport system that people prefer over driving. Electric vehicles running off renewable energy. Bulk freight transport on renewably powered rail. A health system that works to prevent injury and disease. A mental health system that addresses the causes of poor mental health. A police system that works to prevent and reduce crime alongside a justice system where all people have equal access to justice, aiming to keep people out of prison while ensuring that people who do harm are dealt with fairly and victims are supported. Western Australia has the funds through the iron ore royalties that we see flooding in so quickly in great amounts that we could use for good purposes. And these royalties can address these issues. Look at the problems as you try to address them and consider, just consider, is there another way to look at this problem? Is there a solution that does not require traditional responses of Band-Aid solutions or billion-dollar infrastructure? Can we look globally, think with an open mind, and act with care and concern for the planet, for people, and for prosperity? So here I have finished with a dream of utopia. Go on, Mark. Leave a great legacy for future generations. Be visionary. Be bold. Thank you.